So in the last couple of videos, we have talked about the woman at the well, and we're going to continue to talk about her today. And just kind of a quick little recap of last week. Jesus offers her living water. She mistakes it for actual water. There's the issue between Samaritans versus Jews. There was the complication of where do they worship? Do we worship at the mountain on Mount Sinai, or do we worship at Jerusalem like the Jews say? And if you really want to dive back into that, please go back and watch my last video. I'll go ahead and leave a link to it right here, and you guys can catch up and then watch this video. So last week we left off where Jesus is talking to the woman and basically says, hey, I am the Messiah. And now we're going to see what her response is, and we're going to see what the disciples had to say about the encounter with the woman at the well. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're in John chapter 4, verses 27. We're going to go through 38. At this point, his disciples came, and they were amazed that he had been speaking with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why do you speak with her?" So the woman left her water pot and went into the city and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it?" They went out of the city and were coming to him. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you do not know about." So the disciples were saying to one another, "No one brought him anything to eat, did he?" Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, 'There are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest'? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, that they are white for harvest. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for the life eternal, so that he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this case the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor." All right, so let's break this section down just a little bit. So the first thing that happens that John feels like this is important to mention is that she left her water pot. Now some people might overlook that and think, oh, you know what, whatever, she just left her water pot. No big deal. Okay, she was just talking about how she had to carry a water pot all the way from the city to be there. And then she had drawn the water. Wouldn't you want to take that with you back if it was important to you? I mean, water is life. I mean, you have to have water so that you don't die. She left the water pot. Basically, the imagery that we see here is that she left Jacob's water, Israel, basically the law and the physical understanding of water, for the water that Jesus had. She went and did what he told her to. When he said, "Hey, go tell your husband," she said, "I have no husband." And he says, "No, you have 5. You're right." So she's gone to do what Jesus told her to do, which was to go tell the people in Samaria. Now, I want to hit on something really quick because it talks about, Jesus says, I have food that you don't even know about. And just something a little funny that I like to see is if you go look at John chapter 21, the disciples are fishing, and Jesus calls to them and says, "Hey, the fish, throw it on the other side of the boat and you'll catch some fish." And sure enough, they do, and they pull so much in, it's the boat starts sinking. Peter goes and swims to him. And when he gets there, he's got fish already, which is funny because the fishermen couldn't catch any fish, but Jesus already had food, which they didn't know about. You're welcome. That's just a joke. But basically, he's saying, when he's saying there's food that I have that you don't know about, he feeds off the word of God. He feeds off of the will of God and doing what he's supposed to do. Now, we could talk about fasting another day because I think that is really important, because that our God sustains us, not our food. Now, do we need to eat food? Yes, obviously, biologically, we need to eat food. But we need to realize that our nutrition comes from Jesus. I want to tell you a little anecdote about fasting, an experience that I had. Now, be careful when you're talking about fasting because you don't want to brag about it. It's not supposed to. Jesus talks about this on the Sermon on the Mount. Check out Matthew. I think it's either 6 or 7. Or it might be chapter 5. That's the whole Sermon on the Mount. Anyway, he says, don't go out and say, oh, look at how great I am. I'm fasting. And oh, I look so horrible because I'm fasting. I feel so terrible. That's not what this is. This is an educational moment. So when I was in college, it was my first time fasting. And I made it like 36 hours, which was impressive for me because I really liked food. Well, anyway, at the time I had a roommate. And they were cooking chicken nuggets. I wasn't hungry. I honestly was not hungry, but I smelled that food. I smelled that chicken, and I was like, that smells so good. I want it. And I broke my fast. And as soon as I ate that chicken, and I was like, oh, this is so good, I realized it clicked in my mind. I don't need to just crave Jesus for nutrition like I crave food. I don't crave food for just nutrition. I crave the taste, the savory, the sweetness, whatever it is of the food. I enjoy it so much. That's how I should enjoy Jesus. It shouldn't just be, I enjoy Jesus because it's filling, because it's nutritious for me, but it's savory. I enjoy it. That's how we're supposed to understand him being our bread and our living water. He should not just be our nutrition, but the savoriness of Jesus. Okay, and then this next section, he gives another illustration, and he talks about the harvest, and he's saying, you're going to reap that which you didn't sow. Okay, really quick, just in case people don't understand, sowing is where you plant seeds. Reaping is when you actually gather the harvest. Okay, so like I planted corn, that was sowing it, and then the corn rose, and it's ready to be picked. That is reaping the harvest. Jesus explains in this moment is that, hey, you're going to reap. You're gonna take the harvest of stuff that you didn't plant, that you didn't do. It was already there. We're actually going to find this in our own lives whenever we do evangelism, whenever we go out and tell people about Jesus. You should make a relationship with that individual. You should talk to them and lead someone to Christ, and you point them in that direction and you guide them to it. But you know what? They may not receive Christ right there, and that's okay. That's between them and God, and somebody else might do it later. So never think that, oh, I went and evangelized and nobody got saved. Do not look at it that way. That is not the measure of a successful mission. The successful mission is I preached the gospel. I told people the gospel. I tried to make disciples who make disciples. I pointed them to a church. I actually tried to feed these people. You may plant the seed, and then someone else leads them to Christ later on. That's just how it goes, and you got to be okay with that. If you're going on a mission trip with your youth group or with your church or whatever, and you're just, no, you're not getting anybody saved, don't worry about that. That is not your goal. Your goal is to preach the gospel. God is the one that saves, not us. We're just the preachers. We're just the people that proclaim the gospel. Be a part of that. Don't count your numbers of, okay, we got this person saved and this person saved. Look at how many people we got saved. And then it's just like, okay, you got all these born again believers. Now what did you do with them? Did you just kind of leave them there, or did you do anything about it? Did you connect them to a church or something, some form of, are you giving them discipleship? Just something really quick. Jesus earlier talks about being born again, okay? And he equates that to salvation, okay? So we go and somebody gets saved. Okay, they're a baby. They're an infant. They're born again, right? They're a baby. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to feed themselves. Think about when you're having a child and baby comes out, you lay it on the table and you say, see you later. Go in peace, brother. No, you hold that baby. You swaddle them. You feed them. You teach them how to eat. You teach them how to talk. You teach them all these different things. And ultimately, you teach them how to be a believer in Jesus. Someone getting saved is not the finish line. It is the starting point. But there's so many times that we just cut off evangelism, and it's like, oh, yep, they're saved. We're good to go. Another for the kingdom, and we're done. No, we have to make disciples, teaching them all I have commanded you. Matthew 28:19. All right, let's move on. I took a little longer on that than I expected, but I felt like it needed to be said. So here we go. Let's look at verse 39. From that city, many of the Samaritans believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified. He told me all the things that I have done. So when the Samaritans came to Jesus, they were asking him to stay with them. And he stayed there 2 days. Many more believed because of his word. And they were saying to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves and know that this one is indeed the Savior of the world. Okay, so let's examine this really quick. I sort of ignored it in the last section, but I really want to talk about women in the Bible, because a lot of people think that, oh, women were just property, and that they were just kind of second-class citizens and whatnot. And there were a lot of cultures that were that way, but that's not biblical. That's not what we saw in Jewish culture. Women were cherished. They had different roles, but they were cherished. They were not supposed to be lesser than. Think about it. When you look at chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, it says, hey, let us make man in our image, male and female, he created them. That does not mean that God is male and female. We're not going to get into that, or what does it mean to be the image of God. But male and female together are the image of God. Now, culturally speaking, especially at this time, women were not to be trusted. They just weren't trustworthy. They didn't believe the word of a woman. That's sort of what they were talking about earlier when they were saying, "Hey, why are you speaking to this lady?" That's not right. This goes back all the way back to Adam and Eve when Eve ate the fruit. Just really quick, Adam was right there next to her. He should have stopped her. He should have said something. He was responsible, and we could talk about that on a later date. But that was some of the reasoning behind that. But this is actually really important. The fact that women weren't trusted. And we're going to talk about this later on whenever we talk about the resurrection of Jesus. One of the things that people say about history is that the victors are the ones that get to tell the story. Well, and usually in history, the people that were victorious, they wrote about how great they were, and they wrote all the good stuff. The Bible keeps the good and the bad. And many times when the Israelites lost horribly, they still wrote everything that was there. They wrote the good and the bad, which is one of the good things about the Bible and one of the reasons why we can trust it. So first off, Jesus chose the woman at the well to be the one to go and tell Samaria, hey, the Messiah is here. That's awesome. If women weren't trustworthy back then, why would you want to write that down? Wouldn't you want to kind of change that? Same thing with the resurrection. Who does he appear to first? The women. Why would you want to write that down if women weren't trustworthy? They wrote it because it was true. Because if anything, they would have lied about him. Like, oh yeah, Peter saw him. Peter definitely saw him. It wasn't the women. They would have avoided that testimony, but they didn't. This makes it more likely that they believed that these things were true. Now let's look at this. Towards the end, it says that Jesus stayed with the Samaritans. Okay, now understand something. Jews did not do this. The Pharisees would have called this a sin. Moses' law is not prejudice. However, the Jews in that time were incredibly prejudiced. It was very much, hey, you're a non-Jew. This is our God, not yours. We're not sharing. Get out of here. But really and truly, they were supposed to graft people in to Israel. They were supposed to carry the law to all the nations. When you look at Abraham and God's promise to him, he says, through your seed, I will bless all nations. But for whatever reason, they varied off of that path and kept things to themselves. They were supposed to change people, but again, they kept salvation for themselves. What do you do when it comes to salvation in evangelism and leading someone to Christ? Do you judge who should receive it? Do you ever go and avoid telling somebody because of how they act, because how they might respond to you? Do you write people off as unsavable because they are so bad? Francis Chan wrote a book, I couldn't even tell you when, maybe a decade ago, it could have been longer than that, but it's called Erasing Hell, and I think he's come out with a newer version that says Stop Erasing Hell, just to make it clear. It was a response to Rob Bell's book, which was called Love Wins, and basically Rob Bell was saying, nobody goes to hell because love wins, whereas Francis Chan was basically saying, people don't really believe in hell. And the reasoning he says that is because of the way people act. There's an old video of the magician Penn Jillette, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but basically he's evangelized to you multiple times. People give him tracts and stuff, and he said it used to annoy him. And then he really thought about it. He got on YouTube, this is, again, years ago, and he says, you know, these people really believe that I'm going to hell. And he says, I really thought about it. And I stopped getting mad at him, because if you really believe that that person's going to go to hell, how much do you have to hate somebody not to tell them? Christians all just got called out. I know I did whenever I heard that. Because there's so often that we avoid telling people because, you know, they're just a little bit too sinful to hear the gospel. What? Or I don't really want to tell them because they bother me. Like, are you kidding me? Like, they're going to burn in hell for all eternity. You should want to tell them. Talk to them. But listen, make a relationship with them. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When I was in college, I had this was challenged to me, and then I had a friend that I really wanted to tell. I knew he didn't know Jesus, but I was really afraid that I was going to lose him as a friend. I sat down with another friend of mine, and they told me that phrase, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I sat down with my friend, and I said, listen, man, I'm telling you this because I love you. I'm telling you this because you are my friend. And then I shared the gospel with him. And you know what? He didn't receive Jesus, but I did tell him. And I fulfilled my responsibility. I was still nice to him. I was still friends with him. He was friends with me. But he never received Jesus. How do you handle evangelism in your life? Are you getting to know people, and then are you pouring the love of Christ out on people? Are you telling people about the gospel and the importance of it? Or do you just kind of leave that to the pastor? Hey guys, the pastor is there to train you to how to go, therefore, and make disciples. You, me, we're all supposed to go out and make disciples. We go and we lead them to Christ. We show them how to study the Bible. We show them how to read the Bible. We show them how to defend the faith. We show them certain theology. We show them doctrine. We show them how to be a Christian. I challenge you. If you're not doing this, start now. If you're not really sure how to share the gospel, go check out my gospel presentation, and I'll leave that at the end of the video, and go watch that and learn a little bit more about the gospel, and maybe you'll be able to explain it a little bit better. Don't leave sharing the gospel to a video or to a friend or to a pastor. Go and do it. We are supposed to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. And he says, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the most important part that everybody neglects, teaching them all I have commanded you. And Jesus says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks.